The frozen Belgian morning shattered with gunfire as German artillery announced Hitler's final gamble. December 16, 1944, brought more than 2,000 German troops crashing through the Ardennes forests. Their mission was audacious: drive to Antwerp, split the Allied armies, recreate the stunning victory of 1940. But hidden within this massive offensive lay a smaller operation that would create paranoia beyond anything the Wehrmacht achieved on the battlefield. 3 men in American uniforms sat in a jeep at a checkpoint outside Iwil, Belgium. December the 17th, 1944. Their English sounded almost right. Their weapons looked regulation. Their uniforms appeared authentic. Sergeant William Creel raised his hand. The jeep rolled to a stop. His breath hung visible in the bitter air. He had been warned about something that seemed impossible. German soldiers might be operating behind American lines, dressed as American troops. The password challenge came first. The 3 men hesitated. Their English began to falter under pressure. Then Creel noticed the Sten guns, British weapons. No American patrol would carry them. Within minutes, all 3 were in custody. Their olive-drab uniforms concealed German field gray underneath. Unteroffizier Manfred Pernes, Obergefreiter Gunther Billing, Gefreiter Wilhelm Schmidt. They had just become the most infamous prisoners of the Battle of the Bulge. What none of them realized was how their capture would unleash the most widespread paranoia in American military history. Every checkpoint would become a quiz show. Every conversation would test American identity. Every soldier would become a potential spy. The mathematics of detection would be written not in codes and ciphers, but in baseball statistics and Hollywood gossip. State capitals would become weapons. Movie stars would serve as shields against infiltration. 4 months earlier, the impossible had begun taking shape. October 22, 1944, at Hitler's headquarters in Rastenburg, East Prussia. Adolf Hitler summoned SS Obersturmbannführer Otto Skorzeny to his presence. The Führer had a mission that would require deception on an unprecedented scale. Skorzeny already stood among Germany's most feared commandos. September 1943 had seen him lead the glider assault that rescued Benito Mussolini from his mountain prison at Gran Sasso. A light plane had spirited Il Duce away, barely clearing the rocky plateau. October 1944 had brought the kidnapping of Miklos Horthy Jr. Hungary's regent was forced to resign. The nation remained in the war. Now Hitler presented his most audacious assignment yet. German forces would launch a massive counteroffensive through the Ardennes forest. The target was the crucial port of Antwerp. The attack would split American and British armies. It would recreate the stunning breakthrough of May 1940, when German panzers reached the English Channel in days. Success depended entirely on speed. The Germans needed to capture at least one bridge over the Meuse River intact. Allied engineers would try to destroy them. Skorzeny would form a special brigade, Panzer Brigade 150. Their purpose was seizing those bridges before demolition charges could be detonated. Hitler then revealed a decision that made even the hardened commando pause. This could be accomplished more quickly and with fewer losses if Skorzeny's men wore American and British uniforms. Small units disguised in enemy clothing could cause tremendous confusion. They could upset communications. They could misdirect troops. They could spread panic far beyond their numbers. Skorzeny listened with growing unease. The implications under international law were crystal clear. The Hague Convention of 1907 left no ambiguity. Soldiers captured while wearing enemy uniforms forfeited their rights as prisoners of war. They could be executed as spies. Extensive discussions followed with Generaloberst Alfred Jodl, and Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt. Hitler assured Skorzenny the tactic was legitimate. His men simply needed to remove Allied uniforms before engaging in actual combat. The deception was for infiltration only. Within days, Skorzenny submitted his requirements to Jodl. He requested 3,300 men with knowledge of English and American dialects. Equipment needs were staggering. 15 Sherman tanks, 20 armored cars, 20 self-propelled guns, 100 jeeps, 40 motorcycles, 120 trucks, sufficient British and American uniforms for the entire force. October 25th brought an order from the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht to every headquarters on the Western Front. The order requested English-speaking volunteers for secret commando operations. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel himself signed the document. It requested soldiers with fluency in English language and knowledge of American idioms. Skorzenny knew this broadcast request would reach Allied intelligence within days. He sought permission to cancel the entire operation. Hitler denied the request. The Allies did intercept the order on November 30th. Intelligence officers dismissed it as deception. They could not believe the Germans would be so brazen. Volunteers arrived from all branches of the German military. Most had no idea what they had signed up for. Fritz Christ was a 21-year-old Luftwaffe private trained as an English translator. He thought he would interrogate American prisoners far from combat zones. Instead, he found himself isolated behind barbed wire at the training camp established at Grafenwöhr in eastern Bavaria. Security was extreme. One man was shot when his letter home contained too much detail. The volunteers discovered their actual mission only after arrival. The reality of what Skorzenny had to work with would have been comical if stakes were not so high. Of the 2,500 men eventually assembled, only 10 spoke perfect English, with knowledge of American idioms. Another 30 to 40 spoke English well, but had no understanding of American slang. Between 120 and 150 spoke English moderately well. The remainder had only school-level English. They could barely say more than yes or no. Skorzenny later wrote that after a couple of weeks, the result was terrifying. Those with minimal English were instructed to exclaim "sorry" if approached by Americans. They would then open their trousers and hurry off feigning diarrhea. This was their entire cover story. The equipment situation proved equally desperate. OKW was asked to procure massive amounts of Allied material. The delivery fell catastrophically short of requirements. Only 2 Sherman tanks arrived. Both were in poor condition. One broke down almost immediately. Instead of American armor, Skorzenny received 5 Panther tanks, 6 armored cars, 6 armored personnel carriers, 5 Sturmgeschütz assault guns. All were German. The Panthers were disguised with sheet metal cladding and olive drab paint. White Star insignia was hastily applied. Skorzenny himself admitted they would fool only very young American troops, seeing them from very far away at night. The uniform situation was worse. Many were British, Polish, or Russian uniforms captured from previous campaigns. Some were summer issue despite the December offensive date. Others bore bloodstains or POW markings. Units across Germany, confused by the unusual request, sent whatever they could find. The brigade was flooded with Polish and Russian equipment from units that had no understanding of the operation's purpose. Skorzenny managed to acquire enough authentic American uniforms and weapons for only the commando teams. The best English speakers were formed into a special unit designated Einheit Stielau, named after SS Captain Ernst Stielau, who would lead them. These teams received intensive training despite the compressed timeline. They studied the organization of the American Army. They learned badges of rank. They memorized military customs and drill procedures. Some were sent to POW camps at Kustrin and Limburg to practice their English with captured American soldiers. They watched American movies to perfect accents and learn current slang. They memorized American brand names, sports teams, popular songs, Hollywood stars. The commandos practiced walking like Americans, smoking like Americans, even chewing gum like Americans. American body language had to be learned. American gestures had to be copied. Even the way Americans stood at ease required practice. The missions were divided into 3 categories. Demolition squads of 5 to 6 men would destroy bridges, ammunition dumps, fuel stores, any targets that would slow Allied response to the main offensive. Reconnaissance patrols of 3 to 4 men would scout both sides of the Meuse River. They would pass false orders to American units they encountered. They would reverse road signs. They would remove minefield warnings. They would cordon off roads with warnings of non-existent mines. Lead commando units would work with attacking German forces. They would cut telephone wires. They would destroy radio stations. They would issue false orders to create maximum confusion during the critical opening hours. The commandos knew the risks completely. Capture in American uniform meant execution was virtually certain. But there was another danger equally deadly. In the chaos of battle, they might be shot by their own side. German troops might mistake them for actual Americans in the heat of combat. Identification signals were established for recognition. Vehicles would display small yellow triangles. Tanks would maintain specific gun positions. Soldiers would wear colored scarves beneath their uniforms. These signals had to be memorized perfectly. Mistakes would be fatal. December 14th brought Panzer Brigade 150 to assembly areas near Bad Münstereifel. December 16th brought movement orders. They advanced behind 3 attacking panzer divisions. The plan called for Skorzenny's disguised forces to move around the spearhead divisions once they reached the high fens. Then they would race ahead to capture the Meuse bridges. Everything depended entirely on rapid advance by the 1st SS Panzer Division, commanded by Joachim Pieper. If Pieper's armored spearhead broke through quickly, Skorzenny's disguised troops could slip through in the confusion. They could reach the bridges before American engineers destroyed them. The offensive began before dawn on December 16, 1944. Through dark forests, more than 2,000 German troops launched Hitler's last great offensive in the West. Initial assault achieved complete surprise. American forces were thinly spread across an 80-mile front. They faced overwhelming numbers. 4 inexperienced or battle-weary American divisions confronted 30 German divisions supported by nearly 1,000 tanks. German artillery barrage shattered the frozen morning. Searchlights bounced off low clouds to illuminate the battlefield. Infantry advanced through snow-covered forests. Panzers rumbled forward on narrow roads. For the first hours, everything proceeded according to plan. The Einheit Stielau teams infiltrated successfully in the confusion. Dressed in American uniforms and driving captured jeeps, they slipped through the chaos of American withdrawal. One team drove directly into an American-held town. They scouted all defenses thoroughly. On their way out, they redirected an American convoy of armor and supplies to the wrong road. The convoy disappeared into German-held territory. 2 other teams successfully misdirected Allied convoys. They added to the general confusion deliberately. They cut telephone wires systematically. They removed road signs strategically. They spread false rumors of German breakthroughs deeper than actual penetrations. But December 17th brought reality crashing down on the operation's prospects. The 1st SS Panzer Division failed to reach its objectives on schedule. Fierce American resistance at Elsenborn Ridge denied the Germans the northern roads they desperately needed. At St. Vith, American defenders fought ferociously. They delayed the German timetable by nearly a week. The rapid breakthrough that Operation Greif required never materialized. The bridges remained in American hands. Skorzenny realized that same day his mission's original aims were doomed. He attended a staff conference at 6th Panzer Army headquarters. He suggested his brigade be used as conventional unit. The request was approved immediately. Panzer Brigade 150 was ordered to assemble south of Malmedy. They would report to the 1st SS Panzer Division as regular troops. The deception phase was over, but the commando teams were already behind American lines. Some successfully completed their assigned missions. Others were captured when they failed password challenges. Nervous American soldiers noticed British weapons. German boots gave them away. Their English failed under pressure. They could not answer simple questions about American culture. The capture near Iwil on December 17th of Pernas, Billing, and Schmidt created panic that would define the operation's real impact. During interrogation, Schmidt made a statement that electrified Allied intelligence. He claimed their mission was part of a larger operation to infiltrate Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. Their goal was to capture or kill General Dwight Eisenhower himself. Whether Schmidt believed this rumor or was spreading deliberate disinformation remains unclear to this day. No evidence has ever confirmed such a plan existed. The actual mission was capturing bridges over the Meuse River. Nothing more. But the statement had immediate consequences that rippled through the Allied command structure. Within hours, security around Eisenhower was dramatically increased. The Supreme Commander found himself virtually imprisoned in his headquarters at Versailles. Guards surrounded him constantly. Everyone entering the building was checked repeatedly. Eisenhower was reportedly furious at the confinement. The restrictions extended through Christmas. After several days, he angrily declared he had to get out. He didn't care if anyone tried to kill him. But the paranoia spread far beyond protecting Eisenhower. Allied forces, already reeling from the German offensive, now saw potential infiltrators everywhere. Checkpoints appeared throughout the Allied rear areas. They greatly slowed the movement of troops and supplies. American military policemen began interrogating every soldier passing through checkpoints. They used questions designed to identify Germans posing as Americans. Cultural knowledge became the weapon of choice. Sports trivia became security protocol. Entertainment gossip became military intelligence. What is the capital of Illinois? Who won the World Series in 1940? Who is Mickey Mouse's girlfriend? What team plays at Wrigley Field? Who is married to Betty Grable? Where does the guard stand in a football formation? Who is Frank Sinatra? What is the name of the president's dog? The questions ranged from state geography to baseball statistics to Hollywood gossip to American slang. MPs improvised constantly. They created new questions based on whatever American trivia they could think of. The system was chaotic and often absurd. Many genuine American soldiers could not answer the questions correctly. Regional differences meant soldiers from one part of America had no knowledge of details from other regions. Educational differences meant some Americans never learned state capitals or followed baseball closely. The checkpoints created numerous problems that sometimes bordered on comedy. General Omar Bradley was detained when he correctly identified Springfield as the capital of Illinois. The MP believed it was Chicago and held him until his identity could be verified through other means. Brigadier General Bruce Clark was held at gunpoint after incorrectly stating the Chicago Cubs played in the American League. A captain spent a week in detention after being caught wearing German boots. he had taken as souvenirs. British soldiers faced particular difficulties with the American-focused questions. When reconnaissance officer David Niven encountered a guard demanding to know who won the 1940 World Series, he could only reply he hadn't the faintest idea. British troops who could not answer questions about American sports or geography were detained until their identities could be verified through other means. Some American soldiers gave deliberately wrong answers to protest the absurd interrogations. This resulted in their own detention. Others became angry at being questioned by junior enlisted men. These confrontations created incidents that further slowed movement. The paranoia affected military operations significantly throughout the battle zone. Troop movements that should have taken hours required days, as every vehicle was stopped. Every occupant was questioned repeatedly. Supply convoys sat idle at checkpoints, while drivers attempted to prove their American identity. Units rushing to reinforce threatened sectors were delayed by repeated interrogations. Commanders found their orders questioned by subordinates who suspected everyone might be a German infiltrator. The chain of command became fragmented by suspicion. The psychological impact on German infiltrators still operating behind American lines was severe. They found themselves unable to move freely as planned. The cultural questions exposed their preparation inadequacies completely. They had studied military procedures extensively. They had learned rank insignia perfectly. They had memorized American Army organization thoroughly. But they had not anticipated interrogations about baseball statistics or Hollywood marriages or regional slang. These details could not be learned from military manuals or captured documents. This knowledge required years of American cultural immersion. Some infiltrators attempted to avoid checkpoints entirely. They traveled cross-country or through forests. This made them more conspicuous to American patrols who were already on high alert for suspicious movement. Others tried to bluff through checkpoints. They offered excuses for why they could not answer questions. They claimed regional differences or educational backgrounds. Few succeeded in maintaining their cover stories under sustained questioning. Between December 16th and December 31st, American forces captured 23 members of Operation Greif. 16 were captured during December 1944. Team leader Gunther Schultz was captured later and tried in May 1945. Each captured infiltrator faced military trial under established procedures. The legal situation was clear under international law. Article 23 of the Hague Convention concerning land warfare specifically forbade improper use of enemy military insignia and uniform. Soldiers captured wearing enemy uniforms while conducting military operations could be tried as spies rather than treated as prisoners of war. The distinction was crucial and well established in military jurisprudence. The first trial began at Henri-Chapelle on December 21st. Pernas, Billing, and Schmidt faced charges of violating the laws of war by wearing American uniforms while conducting military operations behind enemy lines. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. They had been captured in American uniforms with American weapons. They carried American identification documents, but they wore German field gray underneath. Their mission was confirmed through interrogation. Their intent to deceive was clear. The trial was swift and decisive. All three were convicted and sentenced to death by firing squad. Military justice operated under wartime pressure. Appeals were limited. Time was short. December 23, 1944 arrived 2 days before Christmas. The sentences were carried out with military precision. American military police led the three Germans to the execution site. Captain J. Fisher of the 630th Medical Clearing Station pinned white paper targets over their hearts. Schmidt's glasses were removed carefully. The prisoners were blindfolded with regulation cloth. Military police formed the firing squad. Training took over. Emotions were suppressed. Billing shouted, "Long live our Führer Adolf Hitler," at the moment of execution. His voice rang out clearly in the cold air. The rifles fired simultaneously. All three men died instantly. Their bodies were cut down immediately. They were carried away and buried without ceremony. Eventually, they would be interred at the German military cemetery at Lommel, Belgium. They rest there today alongside more than 39,000 other German war dead. 13 additional Operation Greif participants were tried and executed at either Henri Chapelle or Huy between December 21st and December 26th. Wilhelm Weisenfeld, Manfred Brockny, Hans Rösch, Arno Krause, Günther Schäfer, Erhard Müglich, Horst Gürtitz, Norbert Pollack, Rolf Benjamin Meyer, Hans Wittusch, Otto Stauler, Alfred Franz, and Toni Moraschek all faced firing squads after military trials. Each execution followed established military procedure. Each trial found defendants guilty of violating the Hague Convention. Each sentence was reviewed and approved by senior commanders. The executions were carried out with military precision. Without malice, but without mercy. Justice under military law operated according to wartime necessity. Team leader Günther Schulz was tried by military commission in May 1945. He was executed near Braunschweig on June 14th. Why his trial was delayed until after Germany's surrender remains unclear. Who ordered his execution carried out also remains uncertain. The United States Ninth Army carried out the sentence. In total, 17 Operation Greif participants were executed for wearing enemy uniforms while conducting military operations. Their deaths marked the complete failure of the infiltration mission. The operation's tactical accomplishments were minimal by any measure. No bridges were captured intact. No major demolitions succeeded. No critical communications were permanently disrupted. A few road signs were reversed temporarily. Some telephone lines were cut. Several American units received false orders, though most were quickly corrected. The direct military impact was negligible. But the psychological impact vastly exceeded any tactical results achieved. For weeks, American forces operated under the assumption that German infiltrators might be anywhere. The paranoia affected decision-making at every level of command. Eisenhower's confinement meant the Supreme Commander was isolated from direct observation of battlefield conditions. This occurred during the critical opening phase of the offensive, when his leadership was most needed. The checkpoint delays slowed the American response to German penetration significantly. Units that should have reached threatened sectors in hours took days to arrive. Supply lines were disrupted by security procedures. The widespread suspicion degraded unit cohesion throughout the American forces. American soldiers, who should have been focused on fighting Germans to their front, instead worried about possible Germans among them. Combat effectiveness suffered. The Battle of the Bulge proceeded independently of Operation Greif's failure. German forces drove deep into American lines, creating the bulge that gave the battle its name. At Bastogne, American defenders held out, despite being completely surrounded. December 22nd brought German officers delivering a surrender ultimatum to the besieged town. Acting Commander Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe responded with a single typed word that became legendary in military history. To the German commander, "Nuts!" the American commander. When confused German officers asked what it meant, they were told it was the same as, "Go to hell." The response became an iconic moment of American defiance. The 101st Airborne held Bastogne until relieved by Lieutenant General George Patton's Third Army on December 26th. Patton's forces had executed a remarkable 90-degree turn. They drove north to break the siege in one of the war's most impressive maneuvers. By early January, Allied counterattacks had eliminated the bulge and restored front lines. The battle lasted from December 16, 1944, to January 25, 1945. More than 1 million men participated, making it the largest battle fought by the United States Army outside the Civil War. American casualties exceeded 8,000, including 19,000 killed and 23,000 captured. German casualties were similar, but Germany could not replace those losses. The battle marked the end of Germany's ability to conduct offensive operations in the West. Hitler had gambled everything on the Ardennes offensive and lost decisively. Germany's strategic reserves were exhausted. The path to Berlin lay open. For Otto Skorzeny, Operation Greif was over by December 17th, when Panzer Brigade 150 converted to conventional operations. December 21st brought the brigade's attempt to capture Malmedy. They were repulsed after several determined assaults. Skorzeny was wounded by artillery shrapnel near Ligneville during the fighting. He recovered and continued serving until Germany's surrender in May. His war ended not in dramatic commando operations, but in conventional infantry combat. In May 1945, Skorzeny surrendered to the 30th Infantry Regiment. He spent 2 years in custody awaiting trial. At the Dachau trials in 1947, Skorzeny and 9 officers of Panzer Brigade 150 faced serious charges. They were accused of improperly using American uniforms by entering combat disguised. They were charged with treacherously firing upon American forces. They were also charged with wrongfully obtaining American uniforms and Red Cross parcels from POW camps. Skorzeny's defense rested on a crucial distinction under international law. His men had been ordered to remove American uniforms before engaging in actual combat. The disguises were for infiltration and deception only, not for fighting. A surprise defense witness proved decisive in the proceedings. FFE Yeo Thomas was a former British Special Operations executive agent. He testified that Allied forces had used identical tactics during the war. He had personally worn German uniforms behind enemy lines during missions in France. The military tribunal drew a clear distinction between using enemy uniforms during combat and using them for deception. It could not be proven that Skorzeny had ordered his men to fight while wearing American uniforms. The tribunal acquitted all defendants. The verdict was controversial and generated significant debate. 17 of Skorzeny's men had been executed for the same actions for which he was acquitted. The difference appeared to be timing and available evidence. The men executed in December 1944 had been captured in American uniforms during active operations. Skorzeny, tried in 1947, could demonstrate his orders prohibited combat while disguised. The legal distinction proved crucial. The trial established important precedents regarding the laws of war. Using enemy uniforms for deception was ruled a legitimate ruse de guerre. This was provided combatants removed the disguises before engaging in combat. This distinction would influence interpretation of international law for decades. Skorzeny did not remain in custody long after his acquittal. In 1948, he escaped from an internment camp in Darmstadt. Former SS officers disguised as American military police facilitated his escape. Some historians speculate American intelligence may have tacitly allowed or even assisted the escape. No evidence confirms this theory. Skorzeny spent time hiding on a Bavarian farm. Later, he lived in Salzburg and Paris before eventually settling in Spain. He worked as a military advisor to Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser. His expertise in special operations found new employment in Middle Eastern conflicts. He never returned to Germany. Skorzeny died of cancer on July 5, 1975, in Madrid at age 67. He never expressed regret for Operation Greif or any other wartime actions. His memoirs portrayed all his operations as legitimate military activities. The checkpoint interrogations became part of American military folklore. The questions about baseball and Hollywood became legendary. State capitals and movie stars became symbols of how cultural identity served as a security tool during crisis. The improvised system, however chaotic, proved effective at exposing infiltrators. Their language training could not replicate the casual cultural knowledge that Americans absorbed naturally from childhood. Being American involved more than speaking English or wearing the right uniform correctly. It involved shared cultural experiences that could not be taught. Common references that grew from years of shared media. Collective memories that foreigners could not adequately absorb in weeks of training. This cultural cohesion, often taken for granted, proved to be a national security asset when tested by enemy infiltrators. The shared knowledge of baseball statistics and Hollywood gossip created an impromptu security system. The 17 men executed for Operation Greif are remembered today primarily through military cemeteries and historical accounts. Their graves at Lommel are maintained with the same care as those of soldiers who died in conventional combat. The cemetery makes no distinction between those executed as spies and those killed in battle. All are German war dead. All receive equal treatment in death. Manfred Pernas was 23 years old at execution. Günter Billing was 21 and remained a convinced Nazi to his final moment. Wilhelm Schmidt was 24 and faced death with quiet resignation. Each was someone's son, perhaps someone's brother. Each had made choices that led to that frozen morning in Belgium, to those posts, to those blindfolds, to those rifles. Operation Greif's legacy extended beyond its tactical failure in multiple ways. The operation demonstrated that special operations cannot compensate for conventional military failure. Skorzany's infiltrators could not capture bridges if Piper's panzers never reached them. No amount of deception and confusion could substitute for the breakthrough that never occurred. Special operations require conventional success to create the conditions for their employment. Yet the operation succeeded in creating disruption far exceeding what actual infiltrators accomplished. The mere possibility of infiltration created panic, affecting hundreds of thousands of soldiers. This gap between perception and reality became a key lesson. Modern strategic thinking about psychological warfare draws from Operation Greif's mixed results. The psychological impact often exceeds tactical achievements by orders of magnitude. The Battle of the Bulge ended in late January 1945. Allied forces resumed their advance toward Germany with renewed determination. Within 4 months, the Third Reich collapsed completely. Hitler committed suicide in his Berlin bunker as Soviet forces closed in. Germany surrendered unconditionally on May 8, 1945. The war in Europe was over. The 17 executed Operation Greif participants were already in their graves. Their war had ended violently on Belgian soil far from home. Their operation had failed in its tactical objectives, but it had succeeded in creating confusion and fear that hampered Allied operations. This occurred during the critical opening phase of the battle, when every hour mattered. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, speaking to Parliament on January 18, 1945, while the battle still raged, declared it undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war, and will, I believe, be regarded as an ever-famous American victory. Churchill explicitly noted that Americans had engaged 30 to 40 men for every British soldier engaged. He emphasized that this was fundamentally an American battle and an American victory. The tribute was genuine and deserved. The checkpoint guards who asked about baseball did not know they were creating folklore. They were solving an immediate problem. They were improvising security measures to identify potential enemies. Their solution worked because it was rooted in genuine shared culture. Americans knew about baseball and Hollywood and state capitals because they grew up American. They absorbed that knowledge naturally through years of shared experience. Germans trying to impersonate Americans could study facts, but could not replicate that natural cultural fluency. They could memorize statistics, but could not fake the casual familiarity that came from lived experience. This distinction between learned facts and absorbed culture proved decisive in combat conditions. The German failure demonstrated a principle that remains relevant today. Cultural knowledge absorbed through lived experience over years cannot be quickly taught to adults from different backgrounds. Language can be learned. Facts can be memorized. But cultural fluency requires immersion and time. Modern Special Operations Forces have learned from Operation Greif's mixed results. Intelligence services now spend years preparing deep-cover agents precisely because cultural fluency cannot be quickly taught. Language training, factual knowledge, and behavioral coaching are necessary but insufficient. Genuine cultural fluency requires immersion and time. The fundamental challenge persists across decades. Culture is absorbed through experience not taught in classrooms. This reality shapes modern intelligence operations and security procedures. Operation Greif demonstrated both the potential and the limits of special operations in modern warfare. Small units conducting unconventional operations can create disruption far beyond their numbers. The psychological impact can exceed tactical results by orders of magnitude. Fear and confusion can paralyze forces much larger than the units creating the disruption. But without conventional military success, providing the necessary conditions, special operations cannot achieve strategic objectives. Deception cannot substitute for victory on the battlefield. For historians and military strategists, Operation Greif remains a compelling case study. It exemplifies how ambitious planning disconnected from realistic assessment of capabilities leads to failure. Hitler's late-war decision-making followed this pattern consistently. Grandiose in conception, inadequate in resources, divorced from operational reality. Yet the operation's unintended success in creating panic validated the concept that psychological warfare and deception can be force multipliers. The lessons learned influenced military doctrine for generations. The 17 men who died before firing squads for wearing enemy uniforms would be largely forgotten if not for the historical record that preserves their stories. They were not particularly important men in the grand scheme of the war. They accomplished little before their capture. Their operation failed comprehensively. Yet, their executions marked an important moment in military and legal history. They clarified the application of international law regarding the use of enemy uniforms in warfare. Their trials established precedents that influence military justice today. The legacy lives in the lessons their operation taught. Identity verification remains crucial for security. Cultural knowledge remains difficult for outsiders to fake quickly. Special operations remain valuable, but cannot substitute for conventional military success. The laws of war remain important, but subject to interpretation based on circumstances and evidence. The human cost of war extends beyond those killed in combat. It includes those executed after capture for violations of the laws of war. Each execution represented a human being with family and history and potential. Lives ended by bullets fired on legal authority after proper trial. The graves at Lommel mark lives cut short by war and its brutal logic. The checkpoint guards who asked about baseball were American soldiers who followed orders. They carried psychological burdens from executing prisoners, even enemies convicted of espionage. Operation Greif failed to capture a single bridge. It caused no major destruction. It killed relatively few Americans directly. But the fear it created delayed reinforcements. It disrupted command decisions. It consumed resources during critical days. The indirect impact, impossible to quantify, precisely shaped the battle's opening phase. The infiltrators being caught, tried, and executed within days demonstrated American military justice operating under wartime pressure. The speed from capture to execution reflected combat conditions and established precedent. Modern standards would require more deliberate proceedings, but wartime justice operates under different constraints than peacetime jurisprudence. The Battle of the Bulge ground on for 5 more weeks after the infiltrators were executed. It ultimately resulted in German defeat and the elimination of Germany's strategic reserve. The story of Operation Greif and the Battle of the Bulge reminds us that warfare encompasses more than battlefield operations. Psychological impact, cultural factors, and perception often matter as much as tactical results. A failed operation that creates panic may achieve more strategic disruption than a successful operation that remains undetected. The paradox of special operations lies in this contradiction. The checkpoint interrogations absurd, as they sometimes seemed, worked because they tested knowledge that genuine Americans possessed naturally. Infiltrators could not replicate this knowledge despite intensive training. The American soldiers who fought in the Battle of the Bulge faced not only a powerful enemy offensive, they also faced the psychological burden of suspecting that enemies might be anywhere, wearing any uniform, speaking any language. This erosion of certainty marked a new dimension in warfare. It influenced military operations and security procedures for generations to come. The frozen morning in Belgium, when 3 Germans in American uniforms were captured at a checkpoint, became a turning point. Not because of what they accomplished, but because of what their presence represented. The age of certainty in warfare was ending. The age of suspicion and verification was beginning. Every soldier would need to prove not just loyalty, but identity. The mathematics of detection would be written not in military manuals, but in the shared knowledge of a culture. Baseball statistics would become weapons. Movie stars would serve as passwords. The 17 executed men became footnotes to history. But their operation became a case study in the power of fear. Their failure became a lesson in the limits of deception. Their graves in Belgium mark more than individual deaths. They mark the end of one kind of warfare and the beginning of another. The checkpoint remains. The questions continue. The vigilance endures.